Welcome and hello to another episode of Top Line Talks with me, Aaron Myers.
And me, Jenna Mackey.
As a multi-sector finance and executive recruiter, our aim is to bring stories from inspiring guests across multiple markets to share with you their career insights and business insights. Today, we are delighted to be joined with Chris Jewel-Clarke, who is the CFO of L&G Private Markets. We've got a fascinating story to share, some fantastic insights based on the job that he currently does. Chris, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Good to see you both.
Excellent. I guess just to start off, obviously, I've just given a very top level overview, but for the viewers, it'd be fantastic if you could just give a summary as to what you do at the moment, and then we'll probably delve a little bit into career history and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, of course. So Chris Jewel-Clarke, CFO of Private Markets, as you say. I work for Legal & General, and we split our business into three parts. So the asset management part where I sit, the institutional retirement part, which is essentially the pension business, and the retail part. They're quite separate on paper, but they very much work together as a business.
Yeah.
The private markets division of asset management is, as the name suggests, so it's the private or the direct investments. You can't just buy from investing via the internet, etc., into ISAs and the like. They're long-term assets that we source directly. And my role is to run the finance team that supports that. We have about 50 billion under management. We have aspirations to grow that to over 85 billion precisely by 2028. So it's a really exciting place to be in a really great company.
Very impressive. And so when you say private markets, are there any specific areas of the market that you generally invest in more so than others?
Yeah, so no, it's a great question. So we invest in four sectors. So one is real estate. Mm-hmm. That itself splits between commercial real estate and residential real estate. So an example of that on the commercial side is a variety of different properties, some specialist real estate with some life sciences focus, some more traditional offices, and kind of looking at the real estate needs of businesses of the future. The other side, in the residential space, it's anything from affordable housing, suburban build to rent, usually long-term assets. We don't typically now invest in buy-to-sell, build-to-sell businesses because of the linkage of those businesses to the pension side of the business. We need long-term cash flows. Other sectors, private credit. So that is lending by another name, but in the space the banks typically don't hold. It's a big growth area for us and for the wider economy as a whole. We invest in infrastructure, which is both in the wind or energy needs of the future. So across wind and solar and others we're looking at in the future. And digital, as we can see, as evidenced by this talk, we live in the digital age, and that is very much here to stay. And then the final newest area, currently smallest, but very much on a growth trajectory, is our venture capital business. So that's backing young and exciting, different businesses, probably higher up the risk curve, often coming from universities that we have a relationship with, so Oxford, Cambridge, Northern Gritstone and others.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we've recently launched our Oxford business, so we are now officially Golden Triangle in the UK, and our sort of account base will very much be university spin-outs. It's quite a big part of the market over there. So it'd be interesting to get your take on that later.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, maybe we've got some names in common, but no, I mean that area. Firstly, congratulations to your business, and secondly, just in terms of we found this, it's such an exciting, it's very different from the other three, which typically, as you can tell, have an asset behind them or a loan behind them, which may in turn have an asset. The venture capital is a very, very different space, but it's a fast growing one. Indeed, we're kind of a theme, and what I'm sure we'll come on to in terms of sustainability and our corporate purpose as well as our financial purpose, that we feel is indeed kind of responding to a need of society for funding, not dissimilar to private credit. Loans in a different risk area of the economy. This is the venture capital. There's so many clever upstarting and up and coming businesses that need capital, and the fact that we've got access to large pools of it and expertise in investing is a really good way of growing those businesses while making returns for our shareholders and indeed investors.
Just to wind back a little bit for context, can you just give us a whistle-stop tour as to how you've got into this job? From your, from university onwards. I think it's for people that are looking at you thinking that sounds like a great job.
Sure.
How have you got to that position?
No, of course, pleasure. Yeah. So let me start university as you suggest. So I went to Durham University. I did languages, so I didn't do a directly financial degree. funny because I think that's, as we internationalize our business and also just interest in other cultures and other countries, that's coming back increasingly to be relevant actually to my job, and I'll come to that in a minute. But so I did that. I then joined Grant Thornton, the accountancy practice, started in audit, so traditional way of developing a core financial skill set, which I very much depend on to the day. 3 years in audit, getting my ACA qualification. It's quite a traditional route. But I was aware at that time that I had a real interest in corporate finance and in transactions. And that transactional experience has in a way, been one of the key pillars in my career to date. So I spent various years in the corporate finance team of Grant Thornton, access to all sorts of deals. At that time, typically kind of mid-market, but increasingly got access to the larger and larger transactions. I started to sort of hone my interest personally and the impact of those different sorts of deals and different sort of sectors and different sorts of territories, and kind of had a rounded experience of what the financial climate was like and indeed the skill set required. Happily, in a way, I saw different economic times. So saw the GFC, very hard for us all in many ways, for many businesses, but it was good to see the life cycle of a business and the business circle and the kind of finance sector through that period. I then spent 3 years with Barclays Corporate. For about a week, I was in the UK, and then they realised I spoke Spanish, so I then went over to Madrid and worked on restructuring loans from the corporate balance sheets, large corporates over there. Again, kind of an indeterminate time frame at the start, but ended up being 2 years. Had a fantastic time over there. And then from there was actually sent to various other territories and kind of did a bit of around the world in a bit more than 180 days or 80 days and got some really good experiences there. Came back to the UK. I should have said that was on secondment from Grant Thornton, so I never actually left Grant Thornton.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was very much kind of intending and expecting, to be honest with you, to build my career as an advisor. But having seen, I've been a principal through Barclays, I'd been an advisor, I'd seen different cycles, I'd seen different countries, different sorts of sectors. I started to realize I really wanted to be working in a business permanently, and particularly an investment business. Kind of knew that as a broad concept and broad ambition for my career, but didn't really go looking for anything. And then very happily and very fortuitously, the phone went in about 2015. And it was Legal & General, who were interested in building up what was then the Legal & General Capital business, investing its own shareholders' money in direct investments predominantly, moving from a traded and cash-based business to back the shareholder funds to more into direct investments. Needed skill sets of people who had that capability, so M&A and in alternative assets. And I and numerous other people joined the business at that time, some of whom are still there. And the business has grown out of sight since that time. That was, as I said, 2015, grew through various kind of chapters of its existence and culminating this year, in the summer this year, in the fusion of that business into our central asset manager that was called L&G, to bring the best of the capabilities of our own balance sheet investment team with our distribution and real assets team and the wider L&G team within L&G into an asset manager. And again, that sort of brings us to where I started, that my own role is within the private assets or the alternative assets side of direct investment side of that business, which is a key kind of growth engine of our go-forward strategy.
Yeah. So you did Spanish at university, obviously.
French, Spanish, Italian.
French, Spanish, Italian. Very good.
Wow.
We can switch to one of those.
Oh God, I could dust off the A-level French at some point.
Sure.
Do you still speak those languages, all three?
Clearly not in a native fashion. I wouldn't like to claim that, but so I can. Yes, Spanish probably the best. Having spent the few years really working in the language, having friends, having relationships with people in the language. And actually we were in the Canaries for half term, my family, and it became very helpful. And indeed, increasingly in business terms, does too. So of the three, that's the one that, as I said, I'm clearly not Spanish, but I'm able to operate in that sense. Yeah.
How much has that helped your career, doing multiple languages?
Well, it's interesting. In a pure linguistic sense, absolutely not at all. Other than, I suppose, that maybe I was more effective in my job actually in Spain and then Italy as a result. But I think I'd always want to be part of a diverse business in every sense, and international diversity is certainly part of that. It's interesting, as we addressed one of our own ambitions in our business to internationalize it further, the the need for cultural integration beyond just simple business acumen is so important. And it might sound crazy, but even in the US, where clearly they speak English, it's a wonderful place, but it's a very different culture. So I think if it's been helpful, it's been not the primary linguistic capabilities, more the ability maybe to adapt to and listen to and be respectful of other cultures that I've come through that. So, but it's been, and also I really, really find it very interesting. So I've been lucky to do that and certainly want to do more and more of that in the past. In the future, I should say, sorry.
Am I right in thinking you were recently promoted to a CFO position?
Yeah. So that's right. So as I mentioned, I joined in 2015. I've had a variety of titles. I think my first one was chief accountant, head of finance. I then had an interim CFO role in starting up a new business, Oxford University joint venture, and then a finance director role for various in L&G. I took the CFO role in LGC as we were transitioning into the future state that we are now in, and then culminating in this summer in the CFO role in the private markets division. So it's been growing for a while, I suppose, and it's definitely been a journey and continues to be a journey. This is the start of another journey, but yeah, it's a new title and a new role.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much indeed.
So yeah, for someone, I guess, who's wanting to follow in your footsteps, what's the reality of what your job actually looks like on a day-to-day basis?
That's a great question. And the honest answer is that there isn't a day-to-day basis at the moment. As you'd imagine, this has been a period of great change, exciting change, and we've got a really clear and exciting set of goals in the future. In a way, and I'm sure this is always going to be relevant, the ability to deal with that change, the ability to lead through that change, rather than a certain status that you can run is probably the major learning point for me now, and also not just myself, but for the team and how to sort of shape that. As we're going through any growth periods, getting to a status quo, organizing the new team, because we're combining businesses, teams and cultures and operations, really understanding what you've got to do as a team, as a business, working out the best way and most efficient way and most integrated and collaborative way of doing so is really important. As I mentioned to you, our merger happened in the summer, and we're now heading towards Christmas. It takes a bit of time to really understand what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and so in a way, that has been the day-to-day. I think as sort of a look to 2025 for L&G as a whole, and certainly for my own role within that, really organising teams in imaginative fashion. So not just sticking to the defined task, but working out creative ways of people working together between divisions. I mentioned the 3 divisions of L&G, for example. They're very much designed to operate as one and to interact. And similarly within the teams that sit within those divisions are really important. So, and I think that sort of alluding to your question, Jenna, I think that the CFO role and the leadership role, the big difference for me is rather than doing, it's enabling people to do and enabling people to bring the best of themselves and the best of their team going forward. And that's a fantastic thing for me to be developing and hopefully to engendering in the team going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Because I think it is quite hard for people to visualize until they're in it.
Yeah.
And like you say, do you end up meeting with all the portfolio businesses? Because you've been directors, haven't you, on some of the companies themselves?
Yeah. So we do. As our portfolio grows, I can't personally, nor can any one individual personally be in direct contact very, very frequently with all of them. However, I need to know what their business is about, understand their performance, and certain businesses and certain funds, I will take a particular role, and maybe others will lean into different ones more. To a certain extent, that maps to trajectory of my own role. At an earlier stage, I was more involved personally in a fewer set of businesses. Now I have a broader remit across those, which obviously normally encompasses slightly less depth. But no, really enjoy the direct investment and the contact with those businesses. We're lucky. It's a very kind of unique finance function I think we have in L&G, and we're afforded, of course, our primary responsibility is to the primary aspects of the finance role. So liquidity, reporting, forecasting, good financial discipline. But we have a really deep strategic involvement, and we actually have a lot of contact with businesses themselves. I mentioned M&A, and that was one of the big appeals of the role to me personally, and that continues in my current position as well.
Can you bring to life a little bit? Because I think one of the really interesting insights from the job you do for potential listeners is if they are a head of finance or an FD or someone that's starting a new business and looking for some form of investment, without giving the playbook away, what are the things that L&G would look at that would think that's a successful, sound investment, fits with our goals, etc., that people should be trying to make sure they're trying to sort of cover off when they're either presenting or networking in the market?
An investment that we would support in private markets would normally need to do three things. So the first, very clearly, is to make money. That's very simple, be it for our balance sheet or for the third-party money that we bring into our investments. The how it makes money, there's lots of different ways. Is it a sort of short-term or is it long-term? Usually it's over a long-term period because we're long-term investors. We're not a private equity house that wants a quick flip in our money, for example.
Yeah.
And then there's questions like, what's our risk appetite? And that varies as you go back to sectors I mentioned. There's a big sort of spectrum ranging from certain real estate assets to private credit to venture capital, etc. They've all got different ones. But in all ways, they clearly need to be financially viable and profitable. But that's just a starting position. So the second is that they need to have strong kind of ethical, sustainable values, sustainability values. And that's not just in terms of pure environmental sustainability, albeit that's vital too, but we believe sort of sustainability to be a broader concept that is relevant to people and good for society as well. And you could loosely banner that under impact with a small I.
Yeah.
So doing something good. There are certain industries that would definitely make money in number one, but not do two, and we wouldn't be interested in investors, nor should we be, in my opinion. And so the third one, critically, as we grow, if you think of the fusion of the LGC business with the L&G business, is the third-party capital money. So an investment might be really good at aspect one, make money. Aspect two, really good in terms of, let's say, a decarbonization solution, for example, or a nature solution, an obvious example of that, but there's others beyond that. But also needs to be able to attract third-party capital because we are now an asset manager, and our goal is to ultimately make money from fees for managing investments on behalf of third parties, as an asset manager does. So it's really those three things that we look for.
Just on that, actually, I can't remember the timings of this, but I know the government is trying to change the regulation around pension fund distribution. Has that happened, or is that happening, and has that informed the strategy in relation to this part of the business?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would defer to more expert people. But there are some fundamental themes, for example, DC into VC and ability to access different pots of capital to enable private investments to go there. So the more numerically, the more access to pension funds we have, either via that initiative, and there's the Mansion House Compound and others behind that, or PRT businesses, which is where the pension money comes into our business when we transfer bulk annuities to the L&G balance sheet under management, or any fundamental strategy change of that type or policy change from government gives us access to more funds through which we can drive management fees, etc. So they are good. But in terms of exactly where we are on that, we're still working through the opportunities. And clearly, with new government, new budget, etc., those changes continue to evolve.
You mentioned earlier, I guess, that you invest across, well, essentially, I think it was 5 different sectors. Proportionately, kind of where do your investments sit across that? And it sounds like the venture capitalist side and maybe the green space is where you see a higher growth. But how does it sit now, and what's the kind of future strategy moving forward?
Yeah, so we the businesses of the real estate and the private credit businesses are the most established.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they're the ones that we favour over the other two, nor does it mean that the other two, there's no direct look through to our priorities of the 4 respective to that. We will be growing in all 4 areas. We continue to do so. And we're constantly looking at how we do so. Also, another variable of that is where we do so. And so I'd expect we'll continue in all 4 sectors. We will continue to do to be focused in the UK, but very much with international growth in the US, continental Europe, and potentially further afield. One thing that's really important in our strategy, though, is being really clear where we are strong and where we do have really deep capability, or right to win, as we've called it, and where we don't. And so in certain spaces, we deliberately don't choose to invest as much. For example, private equity is not a part of our strategy in that sense.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So when you look to break, because I guess you can break your business into 2 parts, can't you? It's the L&G, and then it's also the kind of portfolio companies as well. So when you look at talent within that, how do you identify like good, I guess, skills and attributes for each of those 2 different parts of L&G? Yeah,
sure. So it's a question I'd probably reframe it slightly, because I think that it's more by type of roles than exactly where they sit in terms of the source of capital. But there are certain themes, and clearly there are all sorts of types of roles we look for. But there are certain themes that we'd always look for in the people we want to bring in, really at any level. And I'm going to use the rule of 3 again in answering that question. So the first, of course, is technical skill.
Yeah.
So depending on what the role is, and that can range from reporting to deep M&A and at a variety of levels, for example, and everything in the middle. Of course, we assume and we'd always want to go for a high quality of technical skill. In a way, that's the easiest of the 3. The second is a deep commercial understanding of why we're using those skills and why we're seeking those skills. And typically, the more senior you get, the more important that is. But we like to have real impact and application of our capabilities across the organization, which we really marry together as a team, which brings me to my third one is, I think, far and away the most important quality we look for in people is how they interact with other people. Because ultimately, yes, we're an investment business. Yes, we have a large balance sheet ourselves and a large amount of capital under management. And that is our strategy. But fundamentally, we're a people business. So when we're looking for new talent at any level, it's around their values.
Yeah.
Now, that might sound a soundbite, but it's so important. And indeed, I found myself through my career, that aspect of being incredibly clear about what my personal values are and also what value I bring to the organization is just so important. So when we're interviewing people internally and externally, that is the quality, because we are a composite of the people that we have in our business.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because we did a big exercise internally in our business about values and what are our values as a company. And then can those values resonate internally and externally? Because again, we're a very people-facing business. Sure. But then I think the next level is, how do you then assess people on those values? So like how do you do that? Like when you think about it, if you look at the values of L&G and what you want to drive as a business, how do you then bring that into an interview process to feel like, do these people align with the values that we're looking to drive?
Yeah, so I mean, it is hard in an interview process to do so, and there are various techniques we use, and over time, and we continue to evolve those. But the qualities we seek to identify are what they can do and how they will do it, and the importance being on really being led with honesty and openness and transparency, and collaboration is such one of our key sort of themes, the way we seek to operate. And of course, it's a hard thing to evidence, but it's they're both quantitative and sort of qualitative ways in which we feel we can assess that. But generally, it's just we all have judgment in that sense, and we had to rely on the judgment that comes through those processes.
Yeah. How difficult has that been in the new era of interviewing online versus in person?
It's a good question. We like to do at least part of the interview process face to face. Obviously, during COVID, there was a slight impediment to that. But I certainly like to do so, and normally that is part of our process in L&G.
Yeah. You touched on COVID. What was the impact of a 2-year pandemic to a business that requires identifying portfolio companies to invest in? Like, how did that impact you guys?
Yes, in many ways, it led to a curious economic period, which we're still sort of responding to and recovering from in many ways. With changes to availability of capital, changes to use of capital, inflation, et cetera, clearly very profound and lasting changes to the way we work. We continued to invest in that period because our investment fundamentals still remain.
Yeah.
And our sectors did not change as a result, but yeah, that was a very different time for us. But we still continued and still continue to invest.
Still managed to grow.
Yeah. So it's in different ways, but LGC, since I joined in 2015, was on an enormous growth trajectory, and that continued in that period. Yeah.
And then what was the impact for you guys in L&G internally, and like the way in which you work off the back of it?
Yeah. So as for many of us, COVID's kind of accelerated, if not created, quite a significant way of changing the way we work. Clearly, hybrids became a new concept in terms of the way we operate. Our approach to tech changed, our approach to desks, approach to offices and space, and so on and so forth. We remain very much based in huge contacts in the office. I personally like to spend a lot of time there. I like having face-to-face contact, but we don't mandate that all the time. So yeah, it ushered in a whole new era. And I suppose in many ways, in many ways actually helped our expansion, given, for example, international
Yeah, I bet.
is a big part of it. The need to fly for every single call went. These teams suddenly appeared on our screens, etc. So that became a new way of doing things that is still there.
I think we found in our industry is that actually it does make things a lot more efficient, actually, in being able to jump on a Teams call with somebody, but then it's ensuring you don't get lazy with that, and human contact still adds a huge amount of value in all business, circles, right? So it's trying to find that balance.
Couldn't agree more.
Whilst to the benefits of, I was in America last week. It was a whistle stop tour, and absolutely ruined me for the weekend with the jet lag. So I'd imagine a lot of people traveling around the world are grateful to that, but equally it's that human side which has such an impact. So.
I think that's right. My personal view is it's not one or the other. Both have their place. So, for example, a US transaction, if we just use an example of that, there's a lot of information exchange by email, by calls that you don't need to be in place. I like to, if we're forming long-term, lasting relationships, and we're a very patient, long-term investor, build face-to-face relationships as well. And we can do both. It's not one or the other. So that's certainly how I personally view it.
So obviously, kind of green industries, sustainable industries is quite a big growth area for L&G, and I guess the UK, particularly off the back of the budget as well, moving forward. What's the kind of approach to those areas of the markets, and kind of what do you see the future holds there?
Sure. So I think I'll probably start by saying that often people view it as is it a question of a compromise between our financial returns and making sure that we're responsible investors? For us, we see them both as being completely aligned goals. We make money because we're responsible investors, and we'd like to be responsible investors and thereby become profitable or continue to be profitable. Most obviously, we do invest directly in energy solutions that's directly addressing climate change, for example, the wind farms, solar energy, and various tech, clean tech propositions that are kind of supportive of the ecosystem of energy generation. But our approach to sustainability is much broader than that. First, even our definition of sustainability is not just purely energy and decarbonization. It's more on a societal sense in terms of humans, the way we live, the way we work, and the broader sense of sustainability for society. And secondly, its application, both through the decarbonization aspect, but also just more generally, isn't just directly through energy generation. It's in the way we approach our real estate businesses, the way we approach our housing businesses, and general approach to infrastructure and other sectors. So it's not a sector in itself, albeit we do invest directly into it. It's an approach and a sort of philosophy of investing that for us runs entirely through our strategy.
Yeah.
For anyone listening to this, as I said, who's interested in being in your shoes one day, would you say you have one or 2 points that you've maybe sort of tried to live by as you've gone through your career trajectory? Different bits of advice you've picked up the way that you think has been important to you developing as you have?
So nobody's career journey, I think, is linear. Mine certainly hasn't been, and I've been very lucky in my career, and I very much enjoyed it and continue to do so. But it has its setbacks, it has its challenges. I would say to try to best answer your question, my guiding principles now, and have been for some while, probably the first thing is to be really clear what you want and what you represent to the business. So in a way, your goal. So it's very hard to meet your goal if you don't know what it is. So that's the first thing. So for example, do you want to be a CFO? Do you want to be a corporate development director? Do you want to be whatever you may want to be? Be clear about that. And also why that is useful to the business you're in, because it's a two-way relationship with the business. The second one, and this is for any role ever, is be useful. Put the business's needs before your own. And because ultimately you are there to create a service for the business. And the more I've learned that it's around other people and not around myself, the more I think I personally succeeded, ironically. And then sort of that leads naturally onto the third part. And sorry, just before I get to the third part, working hard. There's no secret sauce. There's no way around it. At least I haven't found it. It is just being honest and diligent, not to an unsustainable or unfair or unrealistic level, but just literally good, honest, hard work and sort of integrity with that. Because I think people always respect that. And I think that comes on to the final bit, which again, go back to the values. By nature of my role, for example, I have to make some difficult decisions, as you can imagine, around where we invest. For example, investment committee, people decisions, operational decisions. That goes with the territory. But having I try to have a certain sort of honesty and integrity to the way I do it. And when I've succeeded, it's I think because people respect that I have a set of values that underpins the way I do it, and that is something I've learned the importance of as I've looked at other leaders that lead me and have led me in the past, in terms of like the sort of the North Star. I've been lucky to be sort of educated in the broader sense by a large number of very skilled, very talented people, and that as I've literally written it down on what are the themes I've looked at in those people and worked at that I admire. And it's a combination of what I've tried to answer in that question. I certainly don't succeed, but I try to bring that.
Yeah.
So coming back to, if I was telling my, 15 years ago self, what's the best bits of advice? I'd probably say it's not rocket science. It's not a hidden sort of complicated thing. Be honest, work hard, do it in a decent way to people, operate well with people. And that I think can bring good results.
I like that. Set goals, be useful, work hard and stick to your values.
I think so.
Know what your values are and stick to them.
Yeah.
I think people respect transparency and simplicity, and I've tried to bring that. I don't think it's some uncrackable code. I think that'd be my suggestion anyway.
Great.
That probably brings us quite nicely onto our, I call it a quiz, a top line quiz. It's not really a
Looking
quiz.
forward to this.
You did kind of take one of the questions, so
Oh, did I?
rethink that one.
Jump the gun.
I think we'll do two main ones. I think one will be around, you've kind of touched on it, the relationship between business and driving positive impact. Mm-hmm. And I think the second one will be a little bit more around kind of, you mentioned your career hasn't been linear, for example. So what does that look like and how do you overcome it? So yeah, I think the first question really is because I totally agree with you, by the way, like in order to drive positive impact on the climate, on people, etc., you have to balance, I think, the two. How do you get that balance? How do you achieve that balance in your opinion?
Yeah, so that sort of in a way presupposes that it's one or the other, and we found that there's sort of short-term returns that can be available by cutting corners, mm-hmm. But those aren't returns we want or we really believe in. So it's almost there is no balance; it's both, and that sort of goes to the heart of our investment thesis. In most obvious ways, directly in the sectors that are most obviously, for example, addressing climate change, but more broadly as well. So we make it not one or the other, but one and the other automatically, and take away that dynamic. Yeah.
And then I guess more broadly on your career, so you touched on the fact that it wasn't linear. So looking back at maybe some of the setbacks that you've had, don't know if you've got any anecdotes you want to bring to life. Kind of what were they, and how did you get to a point that you overcame them, and I guess it added to your resilience to kind of help get where you got to today?
Yeah. By the way, resilience is a really key word and probably going back to your question, and I think resilience is a really fundamental quality. So to directly address your question, multiple points. So for example, even the start of my career, I wasn't one of these people who kind of knew exactly what they wanted to do right from the start and started in, for example, the finance world and knew they wanted to be this or that, an investment banker, or a CFO, whatever it may be. I kind of took a job I got a job because I thought it was a sensible thing to do. I sort of worked out over the time what it meant, and I maybe took me a bit of time to catch up. So even from the start, that was in a way a setback. Mm-hmm. And I've been involved in different economic cycles, so I've had the economic aspect of that setback and had to adapt. For example, in the corporate finance world, at a more junior level, deals and restructuring tend to have a natural offset. So I kind of rode that offset myself, slightly similar skill set to an extent, but not exactly. That required a bit of flex, certainly resilience, and it certainly wasn't linear. But more on the personal side, I'd probably split it to two. I've been lucky to work with fantastic people. In many ways, I've learned a huge amount from a vast array of people. And I've been lucky that I've managed to get on very well with many of those people. Of course, like all of us, there are times when that isn't so easy. And indeed, with bosses, I've had many different types of bosses. And again, I've taken things from all of those. There have been times when it hasn't been so easy, and maybe someone hasn't rated my contribution as high as I thought it might be, and down the years I've had a few instances of that, which can be very, very painful. I think one of the development points I've learned is not to place too much importance on one individual's sort of perceived perception of you, but to really build a sort of resilience around my own perception of myself, and basic, going back to your other question on true sort of inalienable principles of hard work and genuine output. But without being too specific, there have been examples when I know that I haven't been the flavour of the month of the boss I might have had at that different time and found that very hard to deal with. There have been personal setbacks in my life that obviously influenced the way that people can do their jobs. I had a really bad rugby injury, for example, that was majorly impactful in my life for a number of months, and indeed getting into sort of years. And trying to navigate that and all the slings and arrows of any normal personal life over a longer period. So all of those, coupled with change, which is both exciting and scary in a sort of way, have tested at times resilience. But part of the reason I love the positioning that word resilience in your question is I think it is such an important quality, and even to my own team and even frankly to my own kids. Not that I'm going my team to kids, but like it's such an important part of any of our lives to be able to have that resilience, and we all draw on that, I think, every day. And the more resilient we are, the more we can deal with certain those challenges that inevitably come.
Yeah, there's too many setbacks, I think, in life, as you mentioned, personal and professional, that things are not going to go your way. And actually, it's going to happen, and some of them are out of your control. But how you bounce back from them, I think, is quite key to success. So, yeah, totally agree. You got off quite lightly. That is our top line quiz. Over.
Very good. Thanks,
well, look, that's it for today's conversation. So thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate you're very busy.
Great pleasure. Thank you for your time as well.
And that's a wrap on this week's episode of Top Line Talks. Thank you, Chris, ever so much for coming in. It's been a really great listen. And for those listeners that have enjoyed, please do hit subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, Apple and Spotify. And until next time, this has been Top Line Talks. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Cheerio.
Great pleasure.